Cohen. They had until June 15th to flag which items the attorneys for Cohen believed to be attorney-client privilege. And attorneys for Cohen pleaded to the judge for more time to get through the 3.7 million files they've received from the government, saying they have people working through the night, sleeping on couches, trying to get through it all, and they're just, only a third of the way through all of those documents. Right now, a special master appointed by the court is going through all of the documents at the same time to help determine which parts are privileged and which are not. The judge said if Cohen and President Trump's team cannot get it done by June 15th, then she would call for a special taint team to take over and finish reviewing the documents to keep this case on track. Remember, there are boxes and iPhones and computers and iPads that were taken out of Cohen's places of residence. The government has finished production of most of all the materials except for 2 Blackberries, and we learned today the contents of a shredder. Meanwhile, Michael Avenatti, Stormy Daniels' attorney, who was asked to intervene in this case on behalf of his client's interests, finally revealed what he's been talking about as he has been referring to releasing audio recordings that he says Cohen has that he wanted released. He said in court today that he got a call from a member of the media that there was an audio recording of Stormy Daniels and her former lawyer. Cohen's team said in court today they are unaware of any audio tapes being released. And after court today, Avenatti took the opportunity to get in front of the mics and talk to reporters about it. Listen.
Mr. Cohen and his attorney, Mr. Ryan, should release all of those audio recordings to the American people and to Congress, so that they can be heard by all and people can make their own determinations as to their importance relating to the president.
And as you mentioned there at the top, Dana, the judge said that he would have to basically stop going on TV if he was admitted into this case. That decision has not been made. But as of right now, Michael Avenatti has taken a withdrawal motion to be admitted for now, but he could always reapply. Back to you.
All right. Thanks for following the circus for us, Laura. The White House briefing minutes away as President Trump meets with Secretary Pompeo ahead of negotiations for a potential summit with North Korea. Plus, President Trump expressing his displeasure with Jeff Sessions. Lots to talk about at the briefing, and we'll bring that to you live. As we wait for Sarah Sanders to begin today's briefing, Roseanne Barr blames Ambien for the racist tweet that led ABC to cancel her hit show. Now President Trump and the maker of Ambien weighing in. Jessica Tarlov is Senior Director of Research at Bustle.com. Gianno Caldwell is the founder of Caldwell Strategic Consulting. Both are Fox News contributors and good friends, so good to have you here.
Thanks,
Let me read to you the President Trump tweet from just a couple of hours ago. Bob Iger of ABC called Valerie Jarrett to let her know that ABC does not tolerate comments like those made by Roseanne Barr. Gee, he never called President Donald J. Trump to apologize for the horrible statements made and said about me on ABC. Maybe I just didn't get the call. The maker of Ambien is Sanofi, the spokesperson there, tweeting, "People of all races, religions, and nationalities work at Sanofi every day to improve the lives of people around the world. While all pharmaceutical treatments have side effects, racism is not a known side effect of any Sanofi medication." So, of course, you knew that this story would have a second life. Gianno, what are your thoughts in particular about the president deciding to weigh in the way that he did?
Well, what a way for President Trump to make it all about him. So that's not unusual at all. When it comes to this particular situation, we got to be very crystal clear. Her tweet was racist, and this is a very powerful platform to make that kind of statement on. In addition to that fact, people have been asking the question, is Roseanne racist? Is she not racist? Is it free speech? And that's not something that I'm going to comment on today. But what I would say is, for the viewers at home, if Hillary Clinton had made this exact same comment about somebody like Condoleezza Rice or anyone else, a strong Republican black woman, what would the conclusion be at that point? And I think that's something that you can leave people with and make them let them decide for themselves how they feel about Roseanne.
It does seem like it's something that we could all agree on. Jessica, she first said that she was joking and she apologized if you didn't get her joke. And then later on, after she said she'd leave Twitter, she was retweeting defense of her. And then also finally then she said, okay, look, I was mixing Ambien and alcohol. But to the drug maker's point, that doesn't actually make you a racist. You might do stupid stuff when you're on Ambien and alcohol, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to all of a sudden change your outlook.
Yeah, those effects are well documented. The racism part seems to be special for Roseanne here. She also has a long history of tweeting and saying very offensive things, specifically anti-Semitic things. And she was even on a roll about George Soros around the same time. And we saw that Don Jr. was even retweeting those kinds of comments. The president 100% should have stayed out of this. I was watching the rally last night on Kennedy's show, and we were kind of taking bets as to whether he was going to say something or not about this. And I thought it was a great move that he didn't, but it was only a matter of time before he would weigh in, and I think it would behoove him to stay as far away as possible from this, certainly not to make it about himself. But it's really dangerous territory here with how closely he has linked the success of his presidency and his own base to Roseanne and her character on this show and what she was portraying, because now we see who the real Roseanne is.
Well, one thing, I do think the president can weigh in if he chooses to. I know one of the complaints about Barack Obama was that as president, people were yearning for him to help unite the country, and that one of the criticisms was he didn't do that enough. And in this situation, it could have been really good for President Trump to figure out a way to say this kind of thing,
not acceptable,
uncalled for, don't do it again. If you guys are willing, I'm going to have to go to commercial break. If you'll hold with me, I want to talk to you about the president's thinking about Jeff Sessions and then Trey Gowdy's comments about that briefing he had last week on Spygate. So if you'll just stay.
And they told me later, oh, by the way, I'm not going to be able to participate in the most important case in the office. I would be frustrated, too. That's how I read that, is Senator Sessions, why didn't you tell me this before I picked you? There are lots of really good lawyers in the country. He could have picked someone else.
All right, that was Congressman Trey Gowdy on Attorney General Jeff Sessions. And we are waiting for the White House briefing to begin any moment now. I have Jessica Tarlov and Gianna Caldwell standing by, but I don't know how much time we're going to have in order to talk to you guys. Any guidance from? We're going to go to Sarah Sanders. All right, go ahead.
While in Houston, he will meet with families of the victims from the tragic school shooting at Santa Fe High School to personally offer his condolences and support. Shortly, the president will host the White House Sports and Fitness Day with a number of activities on the South Lawn, including flag football, baseball, volleyball, golf, soccer, and track. The administration is committed to highlighting the benefits of youth sports and reversing declining participation rates through the development of a national strategy. As the mom of 3 preschoolers, I support them burning as much energy as possible, and I think sports is a great way to do that. Lastly, a special happy birthday goes out to my nephew Thatcher, who turns 1 today, so happy birthday, Thatcher. And with that, I will take your questions. Jonathan.
Sarah, now that Trey Gowdy, who has actually seen all the classified information on what the FBI was doing, says that there is nothing to the allegations that they were spying on the Trump campaign, and in fact, Gowdy says that the FBI was doing exactly what they should have been doing. Given what Trey Gowdy has said, is the president prepared now to retract his allegation that the FBI was spying on his campaign?
No, clearly there's still cause for concern that needs to be looked at. Let's not forget that the deputy director of the FBI was actually fired for misconduct. The president's concerned about the matter, and we're going to continue to follow the issue.
But Gowdy was in the briefing. He knows what was done, and he is saying these allegations are baseless.
Again,
there was no spying on the Trump campaign.
Certainly the president feels that there is cause for concern and it should be looked at in like I just said, the deputy director of the FBI was fired for misconduct. There are I'm not finished. There are a number of things that have been reported on and that show, I think, not just for the president, but a number of Americans, a large cause for concern, and we'd like to see this fully looked into, and we'll continue to follow that matter. Steve, sorry, Jonathan, we're going to keep moving so you guys can see the president.
What does Secretary Pompeo need to hear from the North Koreans today at the meeting in New York for the summit to go forward?
We're continuing to prepare for the meeting between the president and the North Korean leader. As the president says, if it happens, we'll certainly be ready. We've got not only the meeting that you just mentioned, Secretary of State Pompeo is meeting with the president currently, and when he finishes that meeting, he'll be headed to New York for dinner tonight, as well as a day full of meetings tomorrow. The advance team led by Deputy Chief of Staff Joe Hagan met with the North Korean team in Singapore earlier today, and again expected to do so tomorrow. And we want to thank our strategic partner in Singapore, who's been incredibly generous in agreeing to host the summit. And the president's very appreciative of Prime Minister Lee for all of their efforts. We also have reports back from the DMZ. The U.S. delegation led by Ambassador Sung Kim met with North Korean officials earlier today as well, and their talks will continue. So far, the readout from these meetings has been positive, and we'll continue to move forward in them.
Do you think it will take place now, the summit, or is there a denuclearization plan taking shape?
The conversation is going to be focused on denuclearization of the peninsula. That's what these ongoing conversations taking place now will be centered on, as well as this summit that would take place in Singapore. And we're going to continue, as long as that is part of the discussion, we're going to continue to shoot for the June 12th and expect to do that. Zeke?
Two questions for you. First on North Korea. In addition to the nuclear program, that North Korea also maintains other weapons of mass destruction, chemical and biological weapons. Does the president intend to raise those in a summit with Kim Jong-un?
I'm not going to get ahead of all of the topics that may come up. The priority focus that we have discussed and that are in the ongoing conversations with the Secretary Pompeo as well as at the DMZ are focused on the denuclearization of the peninsula. But certainly, I think a number of topics are likely to be discussed at the summit. Francesca, sorry, I'm just going to do one question today. Francesca.
Thank you, Sarah. I do have two, if you'll indulge me quickly. Number one, going back
I'm going to do one question today so I can try to get as many people as possible before the sports day starts.
I'll make it all one question. On North Korea and the possible summit, can you tell us what your deadline is at this point for deciding whether or not that will or will not happen? And on a completely separate topic, Kim Kardashian is supposed to be at the White House today. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, who she plans to meet with? It's been reported that she'll be meeting with Jared Kushner as well as President Donald Trump.
She is expected to be here at the White House. I can confirm she'll be here. We'll keep you posted on any meetings that take place and what those look like. In terms of North Korea, as I've said, we are preparing and expect that to take place on June 12th. And we'll be ready if it does on June 12th. And if it's not, then we'll be ready if it takes place on July 12th. Right here.
If the Attorney General is not living up to the President's expectations, if he is so frustrated with him, why doesn't he just fire him instead of sort of nursing this grievance so publicly?
Look, the President's made his viewpoint very clearly known, and I don't have any personnel announcements at this point. Stephen?
Sarah, the President said during his right to try legislation signing that drug makers will soon be announcing what he called a voluntary massive drop in their prices. Is there anything more you can tell us on exactly when this is going to happen and how widespread this massive drop in prices will be?
Yeah, I can't give any other details at this point, but we do expect some specific policy pieces to come out on that soon. Kelly?
Has the president spoken to Roseanne Barr, who we know has been a longtime friend of his, and why did he choose to address the ABC apology instead of the underlying issue of concerns about a racist comment that she tweeted out?
I'm not aware of any conversations that have taken place. The president simply calling out the media bias. No one's defending what she said. The president is the president of all Americans, and he's focused on doing what is best for our country. And you can see that in the actions that he's taken. You can see where he's focused on unemployment being at the lowest since 2000, opportunity investment zones to encourage investment in underserved communities, an opioid initiative to combat a crisis that impacts all Americans. And today the president signed legislation to give patients the right to try a medication that could actually save their lives. And I'd point out that while the president signed that legislation and actually addressed America, two networks chose not to cover it and instead covered something totally different in Palace Intrigue, a massive piece of legislation that had bipartisan support that was life-changing, literally life-changing for millions of Americans. Two networks chose not to cover the president's remarks on that. He's simply pointing out the bias. The president's pointing to the hypocrisy in the media, saying that the most horrible things about this president, and nobody addresses it. Where was Bob Iger's apology to the White House staff for Jamel Hill calling the president and anyone associated with him a white supremacist? To Christians around the world for Joy Behar calling Christianity a mental illness? Where was the apology for Kathy Griffin going on a profane rant against the president on The View after a photo showed her holding holding President Trump's decapitated head? And where was the apology from Bob Iger for ESPN hiring Keith Olbermann after his numerous expletive-laced tweets attacking the president as a Nazi and even expanding Olbermann's role after that attack against the president's family? This is a double standard that the president is speaking about. No one is defending her comments. They're inappropriate, but that's what the point that he was making. Matthew.
Thanks, Sarah. Does the White House have any evaluation of its own of the recently released study estimating that more than 4,600 people died in Puerto Rico as a result of Hurricane Maria? And if that number is accurate, does this indicate the administration's response to the storm was inadequate?
Look, the president takes the situation in Puerto Rico extremely seriously, and the administration has been monitoring that from the beginning. We've been supportive of Governor Rossello's efforts to ensure full accounting and transparency, and those who have suffered from this tragedy deserve nothing less than that. The 2 Category 4 hurricanes that hit Puerto Rico were historic, and we've responded with the largest FEMA operation in history, and we're going to continue to work with the people of Puerto Rico and do everything we can to be helpful. Emerald? Sorry, one question today, Emerald.
Have any concerns or fear any risk in pushing China on, continuing to push China on these tariffs and trade, considering their relationship with North Korea ahead of talks and what the president has said about that second meeting between President Xi and Kim Jong-un?
The president continues to have a good relationship with President Xi, but what the president's concerned about is making sure he stops the unfair trade practices that China is engaged in for decades, stopping the intellectual property theft that China has been engaged in, and making sure that we no longer allow China to play on a different playing field than the rest of us. He's not going to allow American workers to be taken advantage of. He's going to call that out, and he's going to step up and make those changes. At the same time, we're continuing to work with China and continuing to have conversations when it comes to North Korea, and we hope that those will continue. John?
Thank you, Sarah. Given the turbulent political situation in Italy right now, is the administration monitoring it as well as the devastating effect it appears to be having on the markets in Southern Europe? And will the president consider strong intervention in that situation through the IMF, very much as the previous administration did with Greece 2 years ago?
Italy is one of our closest allies, and we look forward to continuing to work closely with the new government after it's formed. We recognize that Europe is composed of free nations that, in the great tradition of Western democracy, are able to choose their own paths forward. I don't have anything about the United States' specific involvement, but certainly we're continuing to monitor that and stay in very close touch with our allies. Jennifer?
The extension ends again soon. When do you think you'll have an announcement on what will happen next? And is there any chance that there will be another extension?
We'll certainly keep you posted as we get closer to that date. Mara?
Clarify your comments about Trey Gowdy. You said there's still cause for concern, meaning about what the president says was a spy who infiltrated his campaign, or cause for concern in general about the FBI?
I think both. The president still has concerns about whether or not the FBI acted inappropriately, having people in his campaign. And certainly the president has concerns about the overall conduct of the FBI when it comes to this process. Blake.
Explain who was in the campaign. What is he referring to when he said they were in the campaign? What does that mean?
Again, I'm not going to get into those details, but the president certainly has expressed very publicly his concern, as has his outside counsel. Blake.
Thank you. Something appeared to have happened on trade, because last weekend Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said the trade war was on hold. Fast forward a few days after that, there was the threat of tariffs now on auto imports. Fast forward a few days after that, there's now going to be this $50 billion in tariffs. So what exactly happened from the trade war being on hold to a week later? Now it appears that the trade war might be back on.
I didn't say it was on hold indefinitely. And look, the president ultimately makes the decisions on trade, and when he does, we announce them, and that's exactly what's taken place in this process.
Thank you, Sarah. Two things. First, I have my young colleague here, but he has a very interesting question.
Welcome.
I just want to know, how confident does the president feel that he's going to have an agreement on NAFTA before the summit?
Look, we're continuing to have those negotiations, and we'll keep you posted if they get a deal finalized. And the young colleague in the back?
Well, thanks for the compliment.
Hopefully these aren't as tough as bring your kids to work day questions.
My school, we recently had a lockdown zone. One thing that affects mine and other students' mental health is the worry about the fact that we or our friends could get shot at school. Specifically, can you tell me what the administration has done and will do to prevent these senseless tragedies?
I think that as a kid and certainly as a parent, there is nothing that could be more terrifying for a kid to go to school and not feel safe. So I'm sorry that you feel that way. This administration takes it seriously. And the School Safety Commission that the president convened is meeting this week, again, an official meeting to discuss the best ways forward and how we can do every single thing within our power to protect kids in our schools and to make them feel safe and make their parents feel good about dropping them off. Amen.
Sarah, you mentioned Bob Iger a moment ago and asked where is his apology to the White House for criticism of the president and some of the incidents that you cite. Has anyone at the White House been in touch with Bob Iger or anyone at ABC on those incidents in specific and the cancellation of the Roseanne program specifically as well?
I'm not aware of any specific or direct conversations. Andrew.
Denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula being the subject of discussion, the main subject of discussion in Singapore. Does that include the positioning of U.S. nuclear bombers and submarines that aren't necessarily on the peninsula but cover the peninsula, as it were?
I'm not going to get into the details or negotiate that here. Certainly our focus is going to be on total denuclearization of the peninsula and verifiable confirmation of that. Beyond that, I can't get into any details.
You're talking about North Korea, though, not U.S. weapon systems. Right?
Correct. Yeah. And last question, Sayer.
Sarah, has the president received any classified briefing on the details of the intelligence that were presented to Trey Gowdy? And if he still believes that there's cause for concern, why doesn't he just declassify the documents?
The president receives a number of classified briefings, but I'm not going to get into those, certainly not here and not today. Thanks so much, guys, and we look forward to seeing you guys here in a few minutes at the Sports Fitness Day.
Sarah, where are the president's apologies for things that he said over the years?
Pocahontas, where's that apology?
Well, there you have it, the White House press briefing. Today in the news, Roseanne and racism, Russia, and the recusal. First from the Fox News deck this Wednesday afternoon, while significant developments have been breaking about President Trump's administration, the president decided to jump into the fight over ABC's decision to cancel Roseanne Barr's show. ABC scrapped the sitcom star's reboot after her racist tweet about a former Obama administration insider. She deleted the tweet, but it's everywhere, and it's disgusting. An unprovoked attack on Valerie Jarrett. ABC called the tweet abhorrent and repugnant. Roseanne's talent agency dropped her, and then Twitter lit up with some ripping ABC in a familiar reboot of its own. Whataboutism is back. Whatabouters complaining that ABC gave a free pass to more liberal hosts. What about Keith Olbermann? The president did the same. He issued a statement about the chairman of Disney, which owns ABC. Writing on Twitter, Bob Iger of ABC called Valerie Jarrett to let her know that ABC does not tolerate comments like those made by Roseanne Barr. Gee, he never called President Donald J. Trump to apologize for the horrible statements made and said about me on ABC. Maybe I just didn't get the call. Sarah Sanders gave details.
The president's pointing to the hypocrisy in the media, saying that the most horrible things about this president, and nobody addresses it. Where was Bob Iger's apology to the White House staff for Jamel Hill calling the president and anyone associated with him a white supremacist? To Christians around the world for Joy Behar calling Christianity a mental illness? Where was the apology for Kathy Griffin going on a profane rant against the president on The View after a photo showed her holding President Trump's decapitated head? And where was the apology from Bob Iger for ESPN hiring Keith Olbermann after his numerous expletive-laced tweets attacking the president as a Nazi and even expanding Olbermann's role after that attack against the president's family? This is a double standard that the president is speaking about. No one is defending her comments. They're inappropriate, but that's what the point that he was making.
So the White House has responded, and the president did himself in the statement he issued, albeit on Twitter. He never mentioned the racism. By the way, Roseanne said she quit the Twitter, so she's tweeting again, thanking supporters, castigating critics, and in one message in which she acknowledged doing something unforgivable, she also said it was 2 a.m. and she was Ambien tweeting. Ambien, the sleeping pill with well-documented side effects. Enter the Ambien company. Racism is not a known side effect. In other words, Ambien doesn't make you racist. And now we know neither is it a cure. Trace Gallagher is live at our West Coast News Hub. Trace, Roseanne has been all over the place on Twitter, really.
Yeah, if you look, Shep, at Roseanne's Twitter timeline after her show was canceled and after she vowed to stop tweeting, she tweeted, retweeted, and replied more than 100 times. She started out by apologizing to Valerie Jarrett for what she called an insensitive and tasteless tweet, and then went on to write this about Jarrett, quoting here, "I honestly thought she was Jewish and Persian. Ignorant of me for sure, but I did." Roseanne then simultaneously thanked her supporters for defending her and then asked them not to stick up for her, quoting, "Hey guys, don't defend me. It's sweet of you to try, but losing my show is zero compared to being labeled a racist over one tweet that I regret even more." And then when she blamed Ambien, man, Twitter took her to task, and Roseanne responded, quoting, "No, I didn't. I blamed myself. Stop lying. Yes, I have had odd Ambien experiences on tweeting late at night like many other people do. I blame myself, okay?" And just a short time ago, she tweeted this, quoting again, "I'm not a racist. I never was and I never will be. One stupid joke in a lifetime of fighting for civil rights for all minorities against network studios at the expense of my nervous system, family, wealth will never be taken from me." But of course, as we pointed out yesterday, Shep, it wasn't just one joke. Roseanne has a history of pushing the envelope on race, sexuality, and politics. Shep.
Trace Gallagher live in Los Angeles. Trace, thanks very much. Had this not bubbled up, and it wouldn't have, had the president not entered the fray, the lead story today would have been Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General. Remember back in the day when he recused himself from the Russia investigation? It was widely reported, here and elsewhere, that the president was livid. Now we know more. And now we know the Mueller investigation is looking into it. Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, how much can he take? That's next. Relationship with the Attorney General Jeff Sessions is back in the headlines today, with President Trump saying he wishes he'd picked a different Attorney General. Here's the new part. The president tweeting after the New York Times reported that he pressured Jeff Sessions to reverse his recusal in the Russia investigation. The New York Times reports it happened in the president's resort in South Florida in March of last year, and that the special counsel Robert Mueller is now looking into it. Jeff Sessions handed off the investigation to the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, and he appointed Bob Mueller as special counsel after President Trump fired the former FBI Director James Comey. Mueller, of course, is investigating Moscow's meddling into the 2016 presidential election, possible collusion with members of President Trump's campaign, and whether the president obstructed justice. President Trump has repeatedly said there was no collusion, no obstruction. What's been clear all along is now in print. The president wanted Sessions heading the Russia investigation. And now we know he wanted Sessions back on the case even after Sessions took himself off the case. So what was Sessions' explanation? It was simple. It's the law. Justice Department rules required his recusal, according to him. Here's the explanation of his decision more than a year ago. He says he made the call after meeting with senior Justice Department officials and his staff. Listen.
They said that since I had involvement with the campaign, I should not be involved in any campaign investigation. I have studied the rules and considered their comments and evaluation. I believe those recommendations are right and just. Therefore, I have recused myself in the matters that deal with the Trump campaign.
About 2 months later, he testified to the same effect to a Senate panel, the Intelligence Panel, and in it he cited a specific rule with a specific number. This is the rule. This is why I must recuse myself. I was a senior campaign official. It's investigating the campaign. I must recuse. Sessions was, of course, an advisor to the Trump campaign, so he couldn't be in charge of the investigation involving the campaign. That was his explanation. Remember, he was a huge Trump supporter, the first all-in member of the United States Senate. Now he's mostly silent, and he's not entered this fray. John Roberts, our senior White House correspondent, is live in the briefing room this afternoon. John?
Shep, good afternoon to you. The president has used Jeff Sessions, the attorney general, as a punching bag on many occasions in the past, and he did it today to a greater degree than he ever has after the chairman of the Government Oversight Committee in the House, Trey Gowdy, said on the CBS News morning program that he understands the president's frustration about the fact that Jeff Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation. Listen to what Gowdy said.
If I were the president and I picked someone to be the country's chief law enforcement officer and they told me later, oh, by the way, I'm not going to be able to participate in the most important case in the office, I would be frustrated too. That's how I read that is Senator Sessions, why didn't you tell me this before I picked you? There are lots of really good lawyers in the country. He could have picked someone else.
In a triple tweet, the president quoted back what Gowdy said, including the last statement, which said there are lots of really good lawyers in the country. He could have picked somebody else. The president adding in his own words, and I wish I did. No suggestion, though, that the president is about to fire Jeff Sessions. Sarah Huckabee Sanders was asked about it at the briefing today. She said no personnel announcements at this time. The president has made his views clear in the past. It is pretty clear, though, Shep, that he just wants to keep hounding Jeff Sessions about this. We should point out as well that Rudy Giuliani, in an interview with the Huffington Post today, said he would have recused himself as well had he been named the attorney general because he had deep involvement in the Trump campaign. So not quite sure why the president is so on this idea about Sessions shouldn't have recused himself when clearly the law suggests that he should, but he continues to beat him up about it. Shep?
John Roberts at the White House. Thank you, John. Much more ahead on the Russia investigation and tension between the president and the attorney general. We'll hear from a journalist who says the big fear among some of those closest to the president is not evidence of so-called collusion, but another potential crime, the question of obstruction of justice. That's coming up from the Fox News deck on this Wednesday afternoon. President Trump and the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, the president saying he wishes he'd picked a different attorney general. The tweet came after a report that the president told Sessions that he should reverse his recusal from the Russia investigation. There's a lot here. Jeff Mason's with us. He's a White House correspondent for Reuters. Can you guys match this reporting? And what is the request still out there for him to unrecuse himself or something?
Well, I haven't matched the reporting, but it doesn't seem unlikely or it doesn't seem unusual to believe that the president, because we know how upset he was that Jeff Sessions recused himself, that the president spoke to him about it and encouraged him to change that decision. And the tweet today and then the response to what Representative Gowdy said is consistent completely with what the president has been saying for some time now, which is that he felt betrayed by the fact that AG Sessions decided to recuse himself and felt like he should have somebody in that position who would be looking out for him as president.
Has anyone explained the law to him?
You're asking the wrong guy that, Jeff.
I didn't know. I'm serious. I didn't know if there was reporting on that. If his people have gone to him, clearly this has been going on since March of last year. If in the intervening time someone has gone to him and said, well, he did it because of this, you know?
Well, and it's a fair question, and it would be a good one to pose to White House officials. I'm sure that Attorney General Sessions has explained it, because no doubt, as we've just been talking about, he's been grilled by the president about it. And he made clear in the clips that you just played his own logic for having recused himself. He was a senior member of the Trump campaign, and the investigation is looking into the Trump campaign. So that's the reason that he did it. But it's, even if he has explained that to the president or others around him have explained the law to him, it's not something clearly that President Trump has accepted.
We know that Sessions gave that explanation last March in the sort of news conference there. And then in June of last year, he appeared before the Senate Intel Committee and cited chapter and verse of the law. Do we know, is there reporting on whether he has spoken on this matter since, on the matter of the recusal, or even on the idea of unrecusal?
You mean Jeff Sessions?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if he has, but I'm sure that the fact that the story being back in the news today is going to put pressure on him to continue to answer questions about that, both from this White House and from reporters and others around him.
He's taken a lot of incoming. Is there any reporting on what his mindset is these days? We don't hear much from him.
Well, it's interesting to watch Attorney General Jeff Sessions. I mean, he's certainly put up with a lot or accepted or tolerated a lot of abuse and negative comments from his boss, but he's still around. I think Jeff Sessions was a big believer in Donald Trump as a member of his campaign and wanted the job, largely because there are things as Attorney General that he would like to do, including on issues such as immigration. What his mindset is hard to say, though, as you rightly note. Haven't heard him talk about it. He's a lot more circumspect than the President of the United States.
Jason Chaffetz was a congressman from Utah, now a Fox News contributor, and said earlier today on this channel that Jeff Sessions is worthless and that he is Attorney General in name only. That was a lot.
I think that just reflects the fact that the frustration that President Trump has expressed is also shared by a lot of his supporters. And whether or not Jeff Sessions' decision was based on the law, it's not something that has gone over well with people who are supporters of Trump and people who believe in what President Trump has said, which is that this investigation, in his view, is a witch hunt.
Jeff Mason from Reuters and the grounds crew. Shout out to them. Thank you, Jeff and grounds crew. Nice to see you both. Coming up, there's word the feds are about to get 1 million files from the cell phones of President Trump's fixer, Michael Cohen. 1 million files. Which raises the question here in the middle of pollen season, who keeps 1 million files on cell phones? Court showdown ahead with a special appearance. Lines from the Fox News deck. A truck and trailer exploding inside a UPS freight facility in Lexington, Kentucky. Happened today. Sent 8 people to the hospital. A couple of them had burns and possible concussions. Fire chief says they were extremely lucky. Their injuries were not worse. He says the truck had a tank of flammable gas and that the blast does not seem suspicious. A massive dust devil in Arizona. Look at this. It chased a man down a road and he got video of the whole thing. This is Scottsdale outside Phoenix. Dust flying hundreds of feet in the air. Folks in the area haven't seen rain in months, so dust devils could become more common. An excavator in the Philippines crushing more than 100 contraband motorcycles. The president there watched the destruction, part of an effort to get rid of all smuggled luxury vehicles. Today's group worth more than $640,000. The news just in. The reality star Kim Kardashian heading to the White House today to talk about prison reform and a possible presidential pardon. Kim K at the White House. She's there today to meet with President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. As you'll see, we don't have video yet, but we will get it, and when we do. Prison reform is one of the senior advisor's top issues. According to reports, Kim Kardashian plans to ask President Trump to pardon a 62-year-old grandmother who's serving a life sentence without parole for a first-time nonviolent drug offense. The woman's been in prison for more than 20 years already. Kim K. wished her a happy birthday on Twitter earlier today, writing, "Today is for you." Kardashian reportedly learned about the woman's story on Twitter and reached out to Ivanka Trump, who connected her with husband Jared. His own father served time in federal prison for tax evasion and witness tampering. The Senate is currently debating a prison reform bill that Kushner does support. It boosts spending on programs aimed at keeping former inmates out of trouble and passed the House last week with bipartisan support. Kardashians take the White House. Video when we get it. A top Republican on Capitol Hill debunking President Trump's Spygate claims in a specific way. The House Oversight Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy, you may have heard, told Fox News anchor Martha McCallum last night there is no evidence that the FBI planted a spy in the president's 2016 campaign. Chairman Gowdy saying the agency was just doing its job.
I am even more convinced that the FBI did exactly what my fellow citizens would want them to do when they got the information they got, and that it has nothing to do with Donald Trump.
The Republican congressman attended a highly classified briefing last week. In other words, he has all of the information after reports that the FBI sent an informant to meet with Trump campaign advisors because of their suspicious contacts linked to Moscow. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is back with us from the North Lawn. John, Trey Gowdy was specific about this.
He was, and you would think that with somebody like Trey Gowdy, who is an ally of this White House, I think the president counts him as a friend. Certainly the president quoted him extensively this morning about another issue. You would think that if Trey Gowdy says there's no evidence that the FBI was spying on your campaign, the president might say, oh, somebody who I know and trust and value his word says there's no spying, so we'll say there was no spying. But listen to what Sarah Huckabee Sanders said at the press briefing this afternoon.
But Gowdy was in the briefing. He knows what was done, and he is saying these allegations are baseless.
Again,
there was no spying on the Trump campaign.
Certainly, the president feels that there is cause for concern and it should be looked at. And like I just said, the deputy director of the FBI was fired for misconduct. There are I'm not finished. There are a number of things that have been reported on and that show, I think, not just for the president, but a number of Americans, a large cause for concern, and we'd like to see this fully looked into.
As for the president himself, he is sticking by his guns that he believed that the FBI did something improper during the campaign. Listen to how he put it last night at this big rally in Nashville, Tennessee.
So how do you like the fact they had people infiltrating our campaign? Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Can you imagine people infiltrating our campaign? Is there anybody in this big, beautiful arena right now that's infiltrating our campaign?
It is interesting to note and should be pointed out that in Gowdy's statement last night with Martha McCallum on the story here on Fox, he did say that he didn't think that the FBI had done anything improper. In fact, he thought that the FBI had acted properly, but he did add that none of what the FBI was investigating had anything to do with the president. So on that point, at least, Shep, he's likely to get some agreement from the president.
John Roberts on the North Lawn, thank you. 1 million. That's about how many files a court is turning over to federal prosecutors investigating President Trump's longtime personal attorney and fixer, Michael Cohen. All seized during FBI raids last month. 1 million files. A federal judge here in New York City issued the order today. Michael Cohen appearing in court. He's under federal criminal investigation. The feds are reportedly looking into whether he committed bank fraud and wire fraud, and whether Michael Cohen broke campaign finance laws by paying hush money to an adult film star who claims she had sex with President Trump before he was president. The president denies the accusation. Michael Cohen paid her days before the 2016 election. Attorneys for Michael Cohen and for President Trump reviewed the files prosecutors are getting to see if any fell under attorney-client privilege. They flagged about 250 items, we're told, out of more than 1 million, according to a court record. We don't know why. We don't know yet whether prosecutors will ever get to see those items. It's up to a court-ordered independent reviewer. Laura Ingalls outside the courthouse here in Manhattan. What else happened today?
Hey, Shep, well, the judge essentially told all parties they need to pick up the pace and get through all of these documents because she wants to keep this case moving along because there is so much.